Hi everyone, welcome to this evening's webinar and panel discussion, which is all about applying to the Develop Your Creative Practice Fund, one of the Arts Council England's funds to support independent artists, creative practitioners. Today's event has been organised by Launchpad Music Leads and Come Play With Me in association with Arts Council England. Launchpad is a talent development programme that offers opportunities and support for emerging artists, musicians, producers, composers and music professionals in the Yorkshire region. And Come Play With Me is a social enterprise that offers developmental opportunities to people making music and working in music across the whole of Yorkshire. To find out more about any of these organisations, do follow them on social media. My name's Jenny Harris and I'm your host for this evening's event, and we've split the evening into two parts. So the first part, we're going to hear from Arts Council England's Relationship Manager for Music in Yorkshire, Simon Benger, about developing your creative practice, what the Arts Council does to support musicians, what the fund is aimed at and who it's going to be most beneficial to. And then we're going to have a short 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and have a bit of a panel discussion with 4 successful applicants to the fund from different backgrounds and practices. There will be an opportunity throughout to submit questions via the chat or the Facebook chat function. Emily will be watching those and collecting those, and we'll pick up all your questions at the end. But if anything occurs to you during the panel discussion, please feel free to submit a question to us as we go along. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Simon. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I'm Simon. I'm a Music Relationship Manager at Arts Council England. Thanks for joining us this evening. So just a little bit about Arts Council first. Arts Council is the arts and cultural development agency in England, and that means we champion, develop and invest in artistic and cultural experiences that enrich people's lives. We support a range of activity across the arts, museums and libraries, and that of course also means that we fund music and musicians, which is why you're all here. So I'm here to tell you about our fund Developing Your Creative Practice, or DYCP for short. And following on from our session with Music Leads in October on National Lottery project grants, I'm really pleased to have another opportunity to be sharing information about our funds with you guys. So thanks very much, Music Leads. Come play with me. It's great. So DYCP then, it's 4 rounds a year, the second of which is due to be opening for applications in the coming weeks. So I'm hoping this presentation will help you in your preparations for this, should you wish to apply. Right, can I have the next slide, please, Emily? And again, thanks. So, so about today's presentation, and we're going to be looking at the following topics. Firstly, I'm going to outline as a really good starting point, the support that we have available for applicants applying to DYCP who require access support. I'm then going to be getting right into the nitty gritty of what we're here for. So finding out more about DYCP, who it's for and what you can do with the funding. Finally, I'll be looking at how to write a good DYCP application with you, give you a few tips, and then briefly touching on a few examples of previously successful applicants and their applications. I won't go into too much detail here though, because we've got a whole panel discussion, obviously, with some great people on that who can tell you more. Next slide, please. So firstly then, I just want to talk about access support for making an application. Arts Council want to make sure that individuals have access support to developing your creative practice. So if you're applying for funding but need access support, there's a number of ways we can help you. This can include providing our guidance in other formats such as BSL, Braille, Easy Read and Large Print, paying for a support worker, BSL applications, helping managing your project, and help making your project accessible. The standard maximum for an access support in terms of funding is £600. But if you think you're going to need more, then just talk to us about it. We also have a number of our national portfolio organisations, or NPOs, who can offer support. So please get in touch for information on that. To find out about either option, though, email us at inquiries@artscouncil.org.uk and include access information in the subject bar. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, so DYCP. Firstly, what is developing your creative practice? It's a fund for individual artists and creatives thinking about taking their practice to the next stage. We recognise that artists need the time and headspace to progress in their careers, and may need time away from the day job in order to give them this room to think and be creative about their work. So DYCP provides the opportunity for an individual to focus on figuring out what the next stage is of their career and what processes are required in order to get them there. Arts Council can support that process. And the other question, what's it for? Well, DYCP is designed to give creative practitioners the chance to research, have time to create new work, travel, train, develop ideas, network, or find mentoring. Essentially, it's anything that supports this much needed progress in your career. Perhaps, though, the most important thing I can say, and I'm going to reiterate at later stages in this presentation, the most important thing to remember about DYCP above all else is, next slide please, Emily. Developing a creative practice, it's about process, not product. So what I mean is, and I'm going to talk about this more later, but this crucial point is that it's not about putting on gigs or touring. It's for applications that request funding for for the process in making a change in your work. Applications which have a product at the end of them are kind of quite unlikely to be successful, and you're probably better applying to our other program, National Lottery Project Grant, for them. So it's a crucial point that could be the difference between being successful and not being with DYCP. This fund's about taking time to achieve a step change in the way that you create your work. Next slide, please. So, a bit about the practicalities of the fund. We award grants through DYCP ranging in value from a minimum of £2,000 and up to a max of £10,000. There are 4 rounds per year. The first one's closed, but the next application round opens on the week commencing the 21st of December. We haven't announced the official opening and closing dates of this round yet, so please keep an eye on our website and social media for these dates, which will be coming very soon. Regardless of the specific dates, however, the decisions are given 9 weeks after the deadline of the round. It's for individuals or small groups of practitioners, but not organisations. So if you're an organisation, maybe be looking towards project grants, not DYCP. It's a really short application form asking you to tell us about personal creative development ideas and how this funding will help create a change in your work. It's really quite competitive. While there's more funding than previously that we had for DYCP, we get far more applications than we can afford to fund. So you really need to put in a strong application as possible, focused on personal creative development and making a step change in your creative practice as a musician. Next slide, please. As many of you probably already know, DYCP was launched or relaunched in October with a number of updates to meet the needs of individuals working in the creative sector. So I'll briefly explain what these updates are. Firstly, we increased the budget from £4 million to £18 million to meet the demand that we know is there as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's based on previous rounds where we know that the demand from artists has far exceeded the budget. We've invited more people to apply than ever before, and now welcome applications from a wider scope of creative practitioners and enablers. More on this in a bit. We've removed the requirement of 3 years experience in your artistic field, and the requirement is now only for 1 year's experience. We'll accept applications that specifically relate to the impact of COVID-19, especially applications that address how to make your artistic practice more sustainable going forward. We used to say too that if you've applied to us to DYCP and not been successful, then you can no longer apply for the rest of the year. But we've removed this now, so you have more chances to apply. In theory, you could apply 3 times this calendar year because we've already had 1 round. Basically, you just don't get 1 shot anymore. You can apply it a number of times over. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on, what can you apply for through DYCP? So you can apply for research and development time to explore practice and take risks. That's a really key thing here, taking risks. We want to see that the work that you're doing is innovative and will represent something new to you, which always involves taking a risk. You can apply for experimenting with new collaborators, which is always a great way to spark new ideas. You can apply for building new networks for future shows or development of work. Next slide, please. Carrying on, you can apply for professional development opportunities, so going on courses. You can apply to travel in order to explore practice. You can apply for making your practice more sustainable. That relates to COVID. And you can also apply for developing new ways of working, including digital and socially distanced work. So once again, all these areas are very much self-focused as opposed to focused on audiences. It's all about your own practice. Next slide, please. Now that we've looked at what we can fund, let's have a look at what we can't fund through DYCP. So continuation of existing work with no clear development. This is not a fund for business as usual. It's got to be a change in what you do. We can't fund university or college fees or living costs. We can't fund film, cinema, or TV as an art form, as opposed to a visual artist or poet using film. There's different lottery-funded bodies who fund this kind of work, so it's best researching into that instead. We can't fund general research and development for public-facing work. I've already talked about that. It's got to be for yourself. Can't fund loss of earnings or backdated expenditure. And we can't fund performers whose proposal is to perform someone else's work without providing creative input or leadership, because it's your own creative practice that you're developing. So next slide, please. Oh, I think there's one just before that, Emily. That's it, thanks. So in terms of art forms and disciplines that we can fund individuals working in any of the listed art forms on this slide. You can work across different art forms, and in fact, working in a different art form to the one that you're most familiar with may represent the step change in your work that we need to see in all DYCP projects. So it might be that you're a musician, but you also, do some work in visual art, which could, if you had developed it, it could really enhance your overall work. So that's a possibility. Next slide, please. So here's a comprehensive list of the types of creative practitioners that we can fund through DYCP. As you can see, it's pretty comprehensive. I mentioned earlier that we've opened up DYCP to more people, this time ensuring that creative enablers, creative technicians and technical staff who we know play a key role in making great music happen are eligible to apply. So note too that we accept applications from DJs, conductors, composers, music educators, essentially all areas of music and music education. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about what DYCP is and the practicalities of the fund, what you can apply for and what you can't. Now we're going to look at the second part of this presentation, which is focused on how to write a good application to DYCP. What I'm going to cover is firstly, what we mean by making a step change in relation to what you write in your application. What is the step change needed that we need to see? We're then going to look at each of the individual parts of the application form, and I'll provide you with some tips for completing these. And then finally, we're going to look at whether DYCP is the right funding program for you, or whether National Lottery project grants is perhaps a better route for your project. Next slide, please, Emily. Okay, first I'll talk a bit about the idea of the step change that we need to see with your application. All DYCP applicants need to be able to demonstrate that the funding that they're applying for will be used for activity that facilitates them making a change in their creative practice. As outlined on this slide, a good way to think about this is moving from point A to point B. A good application will clearly identify point A, i.e. where the applicant is now in their career and what's got them to that point. And then point B is the destination, which might be something like a guitarist mastering a different style of playing, which will make a profound change to the way that they create music. Or it might be a sound engineer being able to use a new type of mixing console that will enable them to work in different settings. A strong application will be really clear on this and what the objective is. So we've got point A as the start, and point B is where you want to end up. The step change then is the process required to get from point A to point B. This may be going on a course that you've identified, which will teach you the skills you need in order to get to where you want to go. It may be a unique collaboration with musicians you never worked with before, or with an artist working in an art form completely separate to that, to your own. It may involve shadowing someone who's an expert in a particular technique, skill, or art form that you want to master, or it might be receiving mentoring from them. The step change is likely to involve a number of these different facets altogether, as well as some time out of your everyday work in order to give you the space you need, but you never normally have. Okay, next slide, please, Emily. Okay, so as for the application form itself, it features 3 questions, each of which you're given 1,800 characters to respond to. On our online portal, it doesn't talk about a word count, it talks about character count, which is a bit fiddly, but you get the hang of it easily enough. So the 3 questions are: please tell us about yourself and your creative practice. Tell us about the development opportunity you want to undertake, what you hope to get out of it, and how you will go about it. And then finally, why is this important for your practice at this point? And how will this help create future opportunities? So then, question 1 is like the point A of the last slide. Question 3 is point B, the end point. And question 2 is the step change that you'll undertake to get from one to the other. So in your answer to question 1, focus on your experience as a creative practitioner that's relevant to the work that you want to do, rather than trying to list just every achievement over the last few years. Think about the achievements to date, as well as important pieces of work completed, and maybe commissions that you've received. Think carefully too about how you're going to show that you're ready to benefit from a particular development opportunity. In question 2, tell us what you'll do as well as why that's relevant in terms of where you're going. If it involves working with other people, outline as concisely as possible how their experience is relevant to your own journey. And if you wanted to go on a course, make it as clear as possible why this particular course is the best possible experience for you in helping you achieve your goals. Maybe think too about your ambitions and the ambition your activity has. Because while we can fund small one-off opportunities, maybe like going on a short course, we're more interested in supporting extended periods of development, which give you the time to really explore and work in new ways, because we believe that's the best way to achieve the change that you want to. In question 3 then, be as clear as possible on the sorts of opportunities that will be opened up to you as a result of the development you've undertaken, which is why now why is now the right time in your career for that step change you want to make? Perhaps you've identified a skills gap that is holding you back in your work, or maybe a potential commissioning opportunity has arisen and you need to learn about a new way of working in order to undertake it. Maybe you've simply reached an endpoint in the style of music you've been working in and you need to set off in a different direction in order to reinvigorate your work. Just be as clear as you can in that sense. Next slide, please. Okay, aside from the questions, the application form includes requirements for two attachments. So you have to provide these attachments. One's an example of your work, and the other is a supporting document written by someone else that can support the quality of your practice. So think carefully about the attachments and the links that you want to give us. Your attachments should be something that add value to your application. So think about how to demonstrate the quality of your work through them and show that you're ready to take a step up in your practice. So it can be either a file or a web link, whatever works best for you, really. Also, maybe just to mention now at this point as a side note, if you're serious about applying to the next DYCP round and are not yet registered on our application portal, Grantium, I'd recommend getting on our website as soon as possible and getting registered. There's a bit of time required to get you set up on the system, and so our grant management team can get you registered on it. But also, you might want to just become more familiar with the process of, filling in the form and how you attach files to it, just so that you know, and you're not short of time at the end of, when you're approaching the deadline. We also ask for an expenditure budget. So it's just expenditure, not the income, because there's no match funding requirement for developing your creative practice, which is a really great thing about it. We also ask for an activity plan, which is a timeline of your project. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about the application form itself. So what I want to talk to you now about is a few tips about how to improve your application and make it as strong as possible. Remembering that it's a really competitive fund, so you want to do the best job possible for your application. As I've already mentioned, we have far more applications than we can afford to fund. So just work really hard on the application to give yourself the best chance possible. Here's a few tips to strengthen your application. So firstly, focus on your experience and what you'll get out of it, rather than on new work or public benefit. As I said before, this isn't about reaching audiences or creating something which is of public benefit, which is a real key criteria of our other fund project grants. This is all about you. Secondly, tell us what you'll do as well as why. This is really essential. We want to see that you have a really, really clear idea of where you want to go and what it will take to get you there. So what as well as why. Include detail in your activity plan. Make it as detailed as possible. So include milestones, meetings, travel, classes, time to practice, etc. And within the expenditure budget and the activity plan, this is the part of the application where you can really demonstrate that you can manage the activity successfully and whether what you want to do is realistic and well planned. So make sure to take time just double checking you've included all relevant detail in every step of your project and that your costs and your budget are all properly researched. That could be that thing that just gets you over the line with your application. Carrying on then, use the activity to seek out new opportunities and partnerships. So in my job, I see examples all the time of how new opportunities are created through partnerships and collaborations in the arts and culture sector. So, partnership is a really great way of demonstrating that the work you're doing will represent something new for you. It's a new collaboration. It challenges you and it takes you out of your comfort zone and maybe going to change the way that you work. So really explore those opportunities. And then finally, think carefully about what you'll be able to do better as a result of carrying out this activity. if you're able to outline in that third question, where you'll end up being as a result of carrying out the work that you intend to, that will give our panels a much greater confidence in the quality of your application. Okay, next slide, please, Emily. So one question that you've really got to ask yourself before you apply, particularly if you're not sure if this is the right fund for you and you're still just kind of trying to figure out what it's all about, you need to think really carefully about, is DYCP the right fund for you? So you think carefully about the following questions. Firstly, are you an individual? As I mentioned before, we can't fund organisations through DYCP. Are you a practitioner with a minimum of 1 year's creative practice? And do you have evidence to support your practice to date? We really need to see that that 1 year is in place and that you're really committed to what you're wanting to do. Carrying on, do you want to make a step change? Do you have an idea of how to do this? Do you want to work in a new or different way? And is there a skills gap that you want to address? These are the kind of questions that maybe, a side of A4, just jotting down ideas, that ask yourself these questions initially, and that can be the basis of an application form. Or maybe it could tell you that it's not really your practice that you want to work on. You want to just, you want to do a project instead, an outward facing thing. In which case we have other funds like National Lottery project grants that might be the right one for you. Carrying on, would £2,000 to £10,000 help you make that step change that you need? And then finally, can you complete the activity within 1 year, which is the timeline of a DYCP project? Next slide, please, Emily. Thanks. Okay, so this is the breakdown of the key differences between developing a creative practice and our other key funds, National Lottery project grants. I believe that the chart is available in the DYCP guidance. So I'm not going to go through it in loads of detail now, but I really would recommend having a look at it before applying. Project grants has a higher percentage success rate than developing your creative practice. So it may work really well for a lot of things that you want to do. However, do keep in mind that it can't fund the sort of personal development work that DYCP can. So, if this is what you really need to do, then, forget about project grants for now, just focus on DYCP. Other points, of key difference include the fact that the maximum request for DYCP is £10,000, whereas with project grants, you can apply for anything between £1,000 up to £100,000. So there's a vast difference in terms of amounts. Obviously, it's much more demanding and difficult to get those higher amounts from project grants than it is from developing your creative practice. Also, a project grant can be for 3 years as opposed to the maximum of 1 year's length for DYCP. They both have the strengths, the benefits. It's just figuring out which is the right one for you. So please refer to our guidance, read through it really thoroughly, and look at this chart. Next slide, please, Emily. Okay, I've talked about personal access costs in relation to writing the application, but you can also include personal access costs in the application itself. It's worth noting then that your budget can include personal access costs for delivering or managing your project. You'll need to complete an eligibility questionnaire before you start your application, and this will ask you to state your access costs at this point. The amount that you enter is separate from the £10,000 maximum request and can take your total ask above that amount. Access costs are separate from the £10,000 maximum, obviously. So you need to just figure out what is the right amount for you if you need that support. There's no upper limit in the sense as to how much you can include, but just make sure that it's relevant to your DYCP activity. Next slide, please. Okay, so the final bit of this presentation, I'm going to give you an example of a previously successful applicant and the sort of project, an application that they submitted. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of testimonies from other successful applicants on how they found the experience of applying to DYCP. So firstly, this applicant was a Yorkshire-based electronic music producer who was looking to make a step change in his practice by recording and incorporating found sounds in his work. It was clearly outlined as a period of creative development which would involve no public-facing work. So already, this is just the right kind of work for developing a creative practice. He outlined how he would work with a mentor who was a leading expert in his field in order to review his progress. And then the project had a really clear focus on increasing his skills and his knowledge, which he would then be able to use in future work, which would open up new opportunities to him and give him new opportunities to work with other artists and to get new commissions. The step change was really clear, as was the sense of where this artist was going, with the application noting how the funding would support him to achieve ambitions, to change the scale of his practice, to increase his international work, and grow and sustain his career. So it's the sort of project that we want to see coming in applications from music and from musicians. This would be an example of a really good and strong developing your creative practice application. Next slide, please, Emily. So finally, we've got two case studies here, testimonies from previously successful applicants. And all these testimonies and case studies are available on our website under the Developing Your Creative Practice section. So, please have a read through all of those. It could be really good food for thought around, your application. So firstly, a quote here from Nina Clark, who's a singer-songwriter, said that my abilities as a singer, songwriter, musician, producer, creative project manager, and performer have all increased and are set to continue doing so as I discover more opportunity to grow my skill set and creative practice. So give you an idea of, how career changing getting a grant and being able to do this work could be, and has been for a number of different artists. And then from Romelin Anti, who's a poet, who wrote that developing your creative practice is also about your development and step change as an artist. My advice to other applicants is to ensure that you can show how you will be able to improve as an artist with the award. For instance, undertaking bolder endeavors such as working with other artists or a phase of further learning. So, there's great things that can be achieved through having the time and the space to do this work. And we want to see those sorts of projects coming in through your applications. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're at the end of the presentation now. Thanks for listening. I'd just say that, if you want to contact us, then there's loads of ways to do so, and there's loads of really helpful resources on our website that can help you with writing your application. If you've got any questions that can't be answered from writing, from reading our website and looking at our resources, you can contact our inquiry team at inquiries@artscouncil.org.uk, or if you'd like to try and organise a more focused session where you've got questions that can't be answered any other way, then my email address is simon.benger@artscouncil.org.uk. I can't guarantee everybody who contacts me an advice session. I don't have the capacity. However, I will, we can always try and work with other relationship managers in and around to get you that support that you need. Okay, so thanks very much for listening.
Welcome back, everyone. That was a great introduction to DYCP from Simon. I know I made loads of notes, and it's really worth looking at some of the resources that he mentioned online, particularly the case studies. I know I found them really useful to look at real life examples of successful applications. So we're moving on now to the panel discussion part of this evening's webinar, and as I said, there'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions through the chat function or via Facebook. So if you've got any questions, we'll try and answer as many of those at the end of the session as possible. So I'm really happy to be joined now by Supriya Nagarajan, who's an artist with Manasamitra. Hi Supriya, welcome. And we've also got with us James Mabbett from Napoleon III. Hi, James.
Hello.
Dean Freeman from Dean Freeman Creative, and also the founder of Long Division Festival in Wakefield. Hi, Dean.
Hello. Hello.
And artist Keeley Forsyth.
Hello.
Hello. So I was wondering if we should just start by going around and finding out very quickly a little bit more about what you do and what your successful developing your creative practice grant was for. So should we start with you, Supriya?
Absolutely, Jenny. Thank you. I'm a singer-composer with a specialism in Indian classical music. But I like to work in cross-cultural, cross-genre, cross-disciplinary installation sort of work. And the DYCP was instrumental in two things. One is it enabled me to look closely at that cross-cultural practice and take it to the next level, which is to say that I could concentrate on what the best elements of my practice was and work on that further. And I also wanted to set up or have a thought about a mentoring scheme for people from the same background such as me, because I didn't find any role models. So I wanted to be able to do that, actually provide that kind of impetus to people from a South Asian background to actually go into cross-cultural composition work. And it has been a successful launch a couple of months ago. So yes, it's been a very useful fun to have.
And was it last year that you applied for the funding? How long was the period of time you had funding for?
I had funding for 1 year and 3 months, and that was just right because I had given myself a little extra time. So I could delve into the practice and set up the mentoring scheme as I had thought.
Brilliant. Thank you, Supriya. Moving on, James, could you tell us a bit about yours?
Sure, yes. I'm a musician and sound artist, doing all sorts of projects really. But I applied to develop your creative practice because I was doing things under a lot of different names. So I'd release stuff under my own name, do kind of score film work under my own name. I was doing the sound art stuff under Napoleon IV. I was releasing records under Napoleon III, and it was starting to get very confusing. So I decided to spend some time thinking about whether it was necessary to divide it up, to divide the work up in this way, and some time thinking about exactly what the work really was, what was the essence of what I make. So that involved spending time just talking to people, spending time playing in my studio, spending time going and visiting exhibitions, and making new contacts really, and kind of thinking about exactly what it is I do and rethinking it all and trying to make it all sit happily. So I was able to sit down and talk about it a little more coherently.
And so what you're talking about there is almost creating space. And I'm quite interested in that because actually that involves a bit of self-discipline as well. So was the temptation just to sort of carry on doing what you already do, or did you have to work really hard at making that?
Yeah, well, I had to make sure that I scheduled time to actually work on it every week, because otherwise, as you say, it'd be very easy just to carry on as you are and not do anything with it. But luckily, I had a great mentor, Sue Ball, who's from MAP. You probably know Sue. She gave me some good advice and helped me through bits and pieces of it, and kind of get my get my thought processes down on paper and kind of start working. I mean, obviously, halfway through the project, it became a lot easier because I couldn't go outside because it was last year. Well, it was a year-long project, so it's September to this September now, and obviously halfway through it, I had to sit in here for 6 months, so that made it easier, actually.
Thanks, James. So, Dean, be good to hear from you next.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I've been doing lots of things for many years, and I didn't really know. I didn't know what I was doing, but there wasn't like much of a focus. I realised that I'm probably a creative producer, and I call myself that now. But part of the process of actually applying for this in the first place was, what am I and what am I trying to do? As you mentioned in the intro, I formed Long Division Festival, which is an event in Wakefield. And actually, I'd done a lot of things. I'd put on gigs, I'd put on festivals, events, a bit of mentoring, a bit of education stuff. But it was all in Wakefield. It was my city. It's where I'm from. It was kind of easy to do things in my own city. But Wakefield is a small place. And it was starting to get a little bit like big fish, small pond. And I would like to do the things that I do for the rest of my life because I love it. But there's not enough to sustain me in Wakefield. And everything that I put into Wakefield had been great, but it had been at the detriment of having a wider network. I didn't really visit other places very much. My kind of network was well, maybe I had a strong one via email and stuff like that, but I didn't meet people very much. I didn't get out there and do stuff. I kind of got myself into a bit of a, don't want to say a hole because I do love what I do, but as I say, it couldn't sustain me. So when I started thinking about DYCP, it was like, yeah, if this is going to be my career, what do I need? So my funding was based around getting out and meeting people, going to events, going to the kind of conference wing of events. It's a big thing in music now. Stuff like The Great Escape has this whole other stuff going on whilst the music's happening. Mentoring was part of it as well. So getting mentors who maybe work in similar places to Wakefield, right? Maybe not like big cities like Leeds close to me, but like similar kind of places. I could learn how they've done what they've done, and signing up for some organisations as well. My situation is kind of weird because I got the funding a year ago and it was meant to run from January this year to the end of this year. But because my entire funding is based around visiting people who put on events or going to events, I've not done anything. Mine's actually been knocked forward and I don't actually really start it till this January. So I've not really done it yet. I've just had a lot of time to think about it. So mine was kind of around that really, this idea of like kind of almost like for the first time thinking of what I do as a career, if that makes sense. That was quite an interesting challenge at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of sort of not almost getting into a bit of a rut or just a bit too comfortable, and maybe the opportunity to start reaching out, like you said.
Yeah, I think so. And it was my own kind of doing. It was my choice to, because I'm passionate about my home city, and that's good. But it was thinking beyond 12 months in the future, like if I do want to do this forever. And within my application, I kind of referenced my kind of family situation and stuff as well. I've got a young family now. It's even harder for me to just bob down to Liverpool or Brighton or Glasgow and kind of immerse myself in that culture. This funding is helping me do that, which I need to do to be good at my job, basically.
Yeah, that's great. So Keeley, it'd be great to hear from you now.
Hello, hi. So I got my funding on a research and development concept, and it was I had help actually from a producer who works for Sound UK. So it was kind of really nice for me to be able to sit down with her and just perform what I thought I wanted to do in a conversation and dialogue, and she was really good at funneling it into points and making it feel concrete. So even that process in itself, the process of the application form, became quite became quite therapeutic for me, just to kind of be able to settle on what it is that I did, that I wanted to do. But it was based because I had made a record. I was an actress for 20 years, although I was making sounds and music now. But for me, the sounds came from a physical and a kind of more developed world drama point of view. So I wanted to see how I could bring all these things together. So it was mainly, I got the funding to work with collaborators who are visual artists. They kind of came up with an installation thing. So it became a performance art, but I wanted to rehearse the album that I was about to put out in a kind of performance, in a performative kind of way, rather than just recording music for kind of one singular outlet. And it was amazing. So I got to work with the people who was kind of on my wish list. We produced the script. I worked with a choreographer and these visual artists who commissioned this, the kind of onstage set thing. But and it was, and I was amazed that I did get it. And it was kind of one of those things that you learn, because I'd only just become a singer, and you just kind of learn as you're in it, you learn in action. And that was the confidence that I got from it. The doing is part of the creating. So that's what I was for.
Great, thanks, Keeley. And I'm quite interested in the fact that you said you worked with a producer who presumably, did they introduce you to this fund? Did you know about it beforehand?
How did it come about? Well, they had never, this producer had got funding for a lot of musicians, but specifically for tours. So when a musician comes to them and they have a kind of bigger idea of what they want to do, they can flesh it all out and get funding for that. So this was the first time Sound UK, this producer, had got funding from the Arts Council, and it was a joint thing. We knew of each other's work, and she came to me, and we just kind of then researched of what would be the best fit, and it seemed that this funding covered everything, because I was kind of new to the medium, really. So it was very much of a developing new practice. So we came to it at the same time.
James, were you new to Arts Council funding? Have you had Arts Council funding before?
Most of the larger sound installation projects I've put on have all been Arts Council funded. So I've had 3 or 4 successful applications.
I'm just quite interested in this fund is very different from previous Arts Council funds in that it really encourages artists and producers and creatives generally to think about themselves. And actually, we're not used to doing that. Quite often when we're applying for funding, we're used to thinking about outcomes and audiences. And there's something very unique about this programme. And I wondered if you'd found it quite challenging to write about yourself in that way, rather than focus on the usual things we have to focus on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always find it challenging to write about myself. It's a horrible thing to have to do. I'd rather somebody else could do it. But I think the most important thing that I was advised to remember is that it is about you and your practice, and you shouldn't include a kind of outcome, a project, a thing at the end of it that you're working towards, or at least nothing kind of like tangible, like an event. Sorry, I've lost the question there. I just kind of wandered off.
I'll open it up, really. Had you all received Arts Council funding before, or was there anyone who was completely new?
No, I was completely new. yeah, and I think just to elaborate on what I was saying, that it was the funding, like you were saying, James, was there was no end result, there was no working towards something. It was for me finding the inner world of something, and then through that inner world, then where I'm at now, 12 months on from getting the funding, I am now looking towards the next stage of what that inner world has shown me from this research funding, where I can now go as a creative. So maybe I'm just kind of a little bit ahead of myself, even talking now with all this stuff, because it's, so there was no outcome or event that we were working towards.
And Supriya, was there anything sort of that you found challenging about the application process? Because I know Arts Council applications can be quite daunting. I just wondered how you'd found the process.
Actually, because I also lead Manasamitra, we've had a few pots of funding from Arts Council before. So I was familiar with the Grantium system, which is, of course, has its own set of difficulties, as we all probably know. But the DYCP was particularly, actually, I personally found extremely simple if you knew the answers to the questions. So it's a catch-22, because if you know exactly what you want, where you want to go, and you need the space and the money to actually get there, then the application is very easy. I've helped a few friends actually apply the last time around, and a few of them were successful. But the key question I always asked them was, you have to ask yourself if you're ready for that grant, because you can't fit into that grant for the sake of the grant money, rather than, you have to look at it as something that will actually make an impact on your career. So if you are able to do that, then the application is very simple. I actually found it extremely simple and very clear, because the idea was crystal in my head. And that's what I've always said to the people who want to apply. You have to have that idea really clearly in your head for you to be successful with the application.
Dean, was that the same for you? Did you find it relatively easy?
Yeah, I guess so. I agree with Supriya in that I've kind of spoken to friends since I've been successful, and actually it's okay to think about it, look at the form and say, I'm not ready, because just thinking about it might make you realize what you need to do to be ready to apply in 6 months, or however long it's going to run. That's okay. It's like, it's almost like just stepping back and like looking at your kind of CV and like what's missing. If I was going for my dream job, what's missing from this CV? It's like you can just take a little bit of time, because you only get really one shot at DYCP, not one shot to apply, but you're only going to get it once if you're successful. So what's that brilliant dream thing that you want? That's what you want to be thinking of, not some kind of half measure. What's the big thing that's going to make a difference? The application I've been funded. No, Long Division's been funded by the Arts Council before, so I've been through the process of applying and filling out the project's grant form, which is definitely hard, but I've never had to focus on myself. But for me, in all my experience with the Arts Council, this is the easiest form to fill out that you will see. It's relatively simple. It does make you think and reflect, which is good. But this is a really good way in. Like, if you've never applied to the Arts Council before, give it a crack on this. Like, this could be the first step towards who knows what you might do in the future. But to me, this feels accessible. It's not too daunting. And I think, from my point of view, even though I've done like Arts Council stuff before, I find the kind of arts world fairly daunting. I've always felt like a bit of an intruder. I've never felt like part of that thing, even though I definitely am. But I've always felt like the language is a bit inaccessible, and do I know the right people and all these kind of things. And anyone out there who maybe feels like that, this is a good way to kind of test the water. I think, like, maybe collectively on here tonight we've been using these kind of words that always get thrown around and kind of can alienate some people. But actually, when you get down to it, that form, if you've got the idea, Supriya said, if you've got the idea, you do need to have that clear in your head. It's doable. It's definitely worth a go.
I think it's really interesting what you said about it making you step back and really look at yourself and your practice and what you're doing. And actually, there might even, just sort of referring back to Launchpad really and music leads and Come Play With Me, actually, if you decide that you maybe you haven't got that fully formed idea for a DYCP, there are other opportunities that might be a stepping stone towards
I think music leads is really good for signposting these opportunities, like for instance, not to promote another thing, but Help Musicians have been doing a lot of great stuff and a lot of great funds. Maybe actually that's slightly more appropriate for you. Don't waste your time going for something that doesn't fit. You know, you're going to put a lot of time and effort into so make sure it is right, but then if you feel it is, go for it.
Yeah, and there are other quick and dirty applications out there, I suppose, and you know, for just a great idea. So you know, don't feel that you have to have everything sort of nailed for a big DYCP application at this stage. Now, how did you? This is a question generally, really. How did you all find the budget section of the bid? Because I know that's often the bit that people worry about when putting in applications, particularly around how to pay for themselves and how to sort of carve up that time.
I can go first. Oh, sorry.
No, after you.
I think it's if you look at fair rates of pay and you think of yourself as a creative and pay yourself for the number of days you actually spend on that project or on that research, then it is all very crisp and clear, because then you're paying yourself correctly. You feel sort of bought into the project. And I'm really sorry, that's my clock ringing 8. You're hearing it in the background. I'm really sorry. I should have stopped it before. But I think the budget, again, is a thing of, if you know what you're applying for and say you have a mentor and you have your fees and your time accounted for, then it is clear. The budget is clear, because it's not for a project and you don't have to worry about, you know, what the lighting will cost or what X will cost or Y will cost. In my budget, I did have a small a line for artists that I was collaborating with. It's about fair pay, and it's about fair pay to yourself and other artists. So I think those are the things that you would think of in a budget.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say very similar. I've spoken to quite a few people about who've asked for advice about developing creative practice in particular, and they're always surprised to learn that you should pay yourself properly, and they feel almost kind of guilty for paying themselves, and that's really important. I mean, the Arts Council want to see that all the artists involved in the project are getting paid fairly. That's the whole kind of point of the Arts Council, really. But yeah, it just surprised me that people were nervous to put down getting paid a proper amount, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, just was hoping you'd all say that, because I think it's really bad practice, and I don't think it would be looked very favourably to not pay yourself properly for this R&D time.
Yeah.
So did you have any contact with the Arts Council directly before you made your applications? What kind of support did you get? Did you talk to, I know if Keeley's mentioned that she had the help of Sound UK, which sounds fantastic. Did you call on other people to help you with these bids? That would be quite interesting to know about.
I had a conversation with Simon, I think, actually, beforehand. I just dropped him an email and got some advice. It was either Simon or through the Arts Council website. I can't remember which. But people are really, the Arts Council are really open to helping you and want to help you and want to give you advice and help you get the grants. So it's a good idea to open a conversation with them, without a doubt.
Yeah, what about you, Dee?
I second.
Oh, sorry, Supriya.
Sorry. I just second that. I talk to Simon quite often from time to time, and you know, there is that general advice that sort of puts you in the frame to see if you're ready for a grant or not.
Yeah, for me, I didn't speak to the Arts Council I spoke to someone I know called Jackie Wicks, who's awesome. I don't know if I spoke to her initially. I didn't think she got DYCP previously, but I don't think I knew that when I asked to speak to her. She was just kind of someone I wanted to speak to like, I was just like, Jackie, what am I? What do I do? Has it got a name? And she's like, yeah, you're a creative producer. I was like, oh, okay. And then she kind of guided me through that. So it's, you know, it's a conversation just within my kind of peer group, which kind of led somewhere. So, you know, probably it would be unlikely that if you're an artist that you completely isolated from the world. You know, you don't need to necessarily speak to someone about the process. You can just have that conversation that maybe you don't have. You know, what do you think I should do? Who should I be? What am I good at? You can have those kind of conversations, and that might be useful as well.
Yeah, in terms of sharpening your thinking about your actual, it's really good to get some external viewpoints on what you actually do. Or
even if you know someone, if you know, within your industry who you kind of look up to, there maybe a few years down the line from where you are, or someone that you just like, I'd love to do their job. Just drop them an email. Just drop them. Most people in our industry are happy to chat, certainly about themselves. So just like, why not? Just try and open those kind of communications. Like, I'm always happy for people to contact me about stuff. So, you know, why not?
So I'm quite interested in how the projects went and what kind of reporting you had to do to the Arts Council. At the end, you won't know this, Dean, because you've not started. But Keeley, have you had to do any reporting yet to the Arts Council?
Yes, in order to kind of release the last payment, it was kind of based on me answering questions about, yeah, just where I feel. I mean, there were no right or wrong answers. You kind of get that feeling, but it was useful for me to put down on paper so I can actually feel where the where the progress had been made, and even you know, they ask where there were areas where you thought you were going to experience this thing and something different happened. I think that was kind of nice that they were always giving you the space to, yeah, for things to change, for you to be always developing kind of and changing within those months that I had the funding, because it did change quite a lot. I think initially my thinking was going in one direction, but then it developed into something else. So yeah, so I just had to write quite a detailed few pages about that. I don't think I submitted any work. I can't remember, but I did. I logged it all for myself anyway. I recorded things, audio, film. Yeah. So, but that was just for my practice. But it was just a dialogue that was useful to have with them at the end of the process, really.
So I'm guessing that you've all had to be quite flexible given the year that we've had, and that the projects haven't necessarily run to the original timetable that you submitted. And how have you found that? And how have the Arts Council been about that?
In my experience, it set me in, because it happened halfway through the project, because a year-long project. It actually set me in quite a good standing for the last year, really, because I was already thinking about everything I did. So I was able to kind of focus on the bits I could still do and actually kind of carry on. So the project carried on. I went to less museums, obviously, and galleries, and didn't meet anybody face to face. But I was still able to run it and still able to talk to people, thanks to spending some time thinking about it.
And do you just do one report for the final payment, or are there a couple?
It's just the one report, I think, unless I've missed one. But I've been paid, so I must have not.
And how about you, Supriya? Have you had to adapt what you were doing, or have you been able to stick pretty well to your original plans?
I was able to stick to my plans because I got the funding in for the Jan 2019 round. So I've been able to complete the research element of my project, and luckily secure some money from PRSF for the mentoring scheme as well. So I now have that running. So, and it's working well digitally. So I think it has been one of the best things that happened to me in 2019.
So I'm just going to follow that up and ask you, what was the most important outcome for you in terms of when you got to the end of DYCP and looking back on it? What do you think?
I think it gave me the space to actually think about my practice a little bit more deeply, and also take the idea forward about mentoring, composers who are sort of made in my mold and who are following cross-cultural work. So I think those two elements have been very instrumental in at a pivotal point in my musical career, and this is exactly where I wanted to be. And the digital world, I mean, because of COVID and other things, the digital world hasn't actually impacted that work as I would have thought. So I think it all has fitted in very well for me, just luckily. And I'm glad that it has been quite seamless as compared to a lot of other disruptions that's in the music world at the moment.
And Keeley, do you feel that step change? Do you actually feel it now that you've come to the end of the funding period?
Say that again, Jenny. Sorry, it cut out of reception then.
I'm just wondering whether you feel that you have made that step change.
Yeah, massively. It kind of felt like going from 0 to 100, really. But I think because I'm very fortunate to be of an age, I think it was kind of, a lot of it was contained. So it came of, I got the funding when I was 41, but it was just kind of at that point when I wasn't overlooked, but I was ready. So then the seeds had been planted for a long time. So this really enabled the whole thing to just feed, and it just having the time, the space, and and also, I think as an artist, I'm always feeling very guilty when I'm giving my practice time, because I have a young family and I'm having to think, that I need to balance it with, I need to support. So to let all that go and to be present within my creativity was huge. And the shift, whether anyone sees the shift, but the shift to me has been wonderful to feel and feel supported. And I feel like I'm now taking steps beyond what, it sounds all elaborate. God, I'm only kind of, taking little steps, but they feel very right now. Yes. So being given that space and support is amazing, really. And I never would take it for granted, even though we all deserve it.
And James, because you're still in the room with the pianos and the guitars.
This is where I live now. I don't really leave here. I work from here doing this. This is just what happens.
Have you gone poof? Have you worked it all out?
Not yet. It's been I don't know. I think the thing I got most out of it is a couple of things. Firstly, the confidence that I'm far more confident about what I do and my ability to do it. And I think that comes from the fact that I kind of understand it a bit more myself, because I spent so long thinking about it. I can now, when I used to talk about what I did, I'd be like, oh, I do a bit of this and then this a bit over here and then some other stuff. And I just kind of, I wasn't able to be very succinct with my, I'm going to say pitch to people. Whereas now I kind of have a better idea of what it is I do. and it's more clear on my mind, so I can be clearer to people, or at least as clear as I can be. How clear that is, I don't know.
All this to look forward to, Dean. And I mean, did you pick up any? I mean, were any of your grants skills based? Was your skills based at all, Keeley, or was it much more about research?
Sorry, I think my internet keeps being a bit daft. Was it skills based? I don't know. I don't know what you mean by that.
I'm wondering about if you developed any specific skills along the way.
Yes. Well, a long time ago, I trained as a dancer and completely forgot about kind of all of that. But the point of doing this was try and discover what kind of to make the music kind of not on a one track kind of output. So when I wanted to work with a choreographer, and she, from my kind of years which I trained as a dancer, what she gave me in the room she's a movement. She worked with actors really, so she kind of every movement is kind of almost quite still. It's a breathing thing that you kind of go through. So she set me on a path with certain things. So I suppose that is a skill that without that I would have maybe gone down a more conventional way of trying to merge sound and movement and dance and film together. But she gave me the skill to get rid of all that and just, I don't know.
Yeah. And the other thing that strikes me from listening to you all is that the role of mentors seems to be quite an important one in DYCP and worth thinking about. James, you've talked about Sue Ball being able to almost keep you on track as well in terms of your focus, which is really interesting.
Yeah, she'd send me an email every month saying, "Have you done anything? Are you doing some work? Yeah, just checking up," and that was really helpful. And totally worth getting just to do that, really, because I'll be like, "Yeah, I have actually. Look."
And did you and Supriya in a way has been becoming a mentor, which is an interesting sort of part of that. And did you work with a mentor at all, Supriya?
Yes, I did. I was fortunate to be one of the new voices for sound and music in 2018. And that then enabled me to work with a couple of mentors towards the final outcome of that project. And that also gave me the insight to see how much I needed to sort of be able to do the mentoring myself, pass on skills, because I couldn't see a role model for myself. So that's been my endeavor with the mentoring program, to just be there and be a role model without any definitions to the mentoring scheme, which has been interesting for me personally as well, because I'm learning a lot from that as well. It's the first time I'm doing something like this.
And yours is going to be almost like a series of mentors and networks and relationships. And how did you sort of get those networks and relationships? How did you start that process? Were they people you already knew or friends of friends?
No, actually, I tried to avoid that. I was trying to find where I could totally fresh networks. By coincidence, I remember last year I went to an event in Liverpool, but it was chance that I was there. It was like a music tourism type event, but someone did a presentation there about their business and their festival. I was just like, wow, this sounds awesome. And I just made a note of them. And so that was someone that I contacted. We'd never spoken before, but I was just like, bit of a gushing email, like, love what you do. I'd love to come spend some time with you. I haven't yet. I don't know if I will now. My mentors might end up changing a little bit, but that was my approach. I was just desperately trying to find brand new sources of information and people. So yeah, it was
Did
kind
people
of just
respond
throwing it out a little bit,
positively,
really.
largely to that cold calling?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it kind of helps. I'm not well. It is cold, but I can say hi. I'm Dean, and this is a festival that I run, and this is some examples of what I do. I'm not completely coming out of the blue. You know, they can kind of check up and see if they think what I do is all right. You know, so it was a nicely formed email. It was all making sure that they kind of knew what they were getting into. But to be fair, they're getting paid as well. You know, they're getting a good day rate to do that, so that's going to appeal to them a little bit as well. So that was kind of my approach. I mean, to be fair, like I'd never really thought about having one mentor all the way through. It does kind of sound quite appealing to have that kind of someone checking in with you and stuff. But I think what I was trying to achieve with mine was a real breadth of different experiences, because I don't feel I've got a very clear trajectory. I just want to, one of the organisations was kind of did events in woodlands. That was their thing. I've never done an outdoor event, so that was like an interesting thing. One was more like literature-based events. One was like a real kind of like kind of eco-style events down south. So I was just trying to like hit loads of different things and see what would kind of work for me, because all my events are city-based, venue-based. That's what I do. So I want to do other stuff,
Sure. We've got about 10 minutes or so left, so I'm going to bring Simon back into the chat now, and we'll pick up some questions, which hopefully Emily will feed to us by some magical means. Oh, here we go. So here's a question. What's it like filling out a timeline without a defined project that has an outcome or a natural end? How do you approach that? I don't know if anybody wants to tackle that. Maybe Dean, you could start, because you did talk about not having a clear trajectory. Sorry.
I don't think I'm best on that. Actually, basically, my timeline was, here's the year of events, I'm going to go to them. So it was quite easy just to look through the kind of calendar for the year. So that mine was relatively easy in that sense. I was just following where the stuff was, if you know what I mean.
What about James? Have you got an answer to that? How did you structure your timeline?
I think it's actually, for me anyway, it was a bit easier than a project with like a defined outcome, because there is no defined outcome, so you can just make it up. You can decide exactly what you want to do and the timescale you want to do it. So it's relatively simple. As long as you know what you want to do, then it's kind of fine, because there's no right answer to it.
Have you got any tips on that, Simon? Does it matter if you get into your project and things change, for example?
Well, I suppose just to answer the bit about an outcome or a natural end, from a really boring bureaucratic arts council point of view, a really good way of finishing off your DYCP timeline is write an evaluation form. That can be the final bit of all your projects, so that's dead easy. But in terms of like, change, it absolutely, it's completely natural part of any project that anybody undertakes. It's one thing writing down on a piece of paper what you intend to do, and it would be great if it always went like that, but actually things never quite work out in just that way. So we anticipate that things are going to change over the course of your project, and we have that sort of flexibility built into the process. So I hope that helps.
Great, thanks. And presumably quite a lot of detail is always useful if you've got it. So next question. How much information is appropriate when giving a sense of self and personal journey in answer to why now is the right time to apply? I'm going to ask Supriya that question first, because Supriya, you're really experienced. So how, you've done loads. So how did you approach deciding what to filter from your extensive career and put into the answer to question 1?
I think it's really important to give an idea of who you are in that answer. So, the first basis of your answer would be your practice. So where you started, so the beginning point, and then highlights. Because of the word count and the character count, it's good to have highlights of what you consider to be some of the best things that have happened in the career, and and a natural sort of lead into why you need to make a change. So perhaps the last three examples or the last things that you actually mention in that section is to sort of denote what it is that what stage you're currently at, such that you want to make a leap into the next stage. So it's like structuring your answer in 3 bits: who you were, what you did, and what you want to become. So in a way, it's capturing that in 250 words, I think it is.
That's brilliantly concise and clear. Has anybody else got anything to add?
I kind of, for me, I'd start at the end. So it's having a clear idea what the end point is. And if you know what the end is, if you work, for me, in my mind, if you work backwards, then there's certain things that you will have done in your practice so far that make sense on that trajectory. If you start at the beginning trying to list everything that you've done, or it's come across as a bit random, I would start at the end. So my end point was to be potentially was to be a creative producer that's going to do stuff outside Wakefield. That's the dream. So what's my best example? My issue is that I only do stuff in Wakefield. What's the best stuff I've done in Wakefield that, if I'm successful, will travel out with me? So that thinking of that way automatically cuts some stuff out that, kind of quirky events that I've done that might sound really like fun or cool or whatever, but actually they're not really part of that journey. Helps me pick out the key points that try and create a sense of trajectory, I think, was what I tried to do.
And Keeley, you were sort of moving across disciplines as well, weren't you? And really starting something new. So how did you approach that in your question 1? Do you remember?
Well, because I cheated a bit and had a producer who was writing down all my gobbledygooch. But I just remember I was just really, although I didn't know how I was going to go about it, I was really clear in what it is, the areas that I wanted to explore. And so, and I could have the things of me backing up from the kind of drama point of view, because I'd been an actress for 20 years. So I did kind of use the experience that I had as an actor, although I was hopefully getting the funding for another, like you say, another discipline. But I just used all the small nuggets that I had, and I'm looking at the question again about it wasn't question 1. I thought the question 1 was about the timeline. Sorry.
Sorry, I meant question 1 on the form.
I see. Sorry. Yes.
Well, we've got another question, which is a really good question, something we haven't talked about yet, which is about supporting statements. So what is Arts Council looking for in terms of a supporting statement? Do you want to start with that, Simon, and then we'll find out how other people approached that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it can take all sorts of forms. It can be from somebody personally, or an organisation that who you've worked with a lot, and they're really familiar with your work, and they can really attest to what you do. Hopefully they're going to say some really great things about what a fantastic musician. But also that they can talk realistically about, are you at the right stage of your where you're going, your career, to make the change that's required that you want to do. They can provide objectivity to support your application. It doesn't have to be a supporting letter though from somebody. It could be a review of your work. So somebody who is a professional critic who has a clear and wide understanding of the area you work in, that attests the quality of your work. So it can take a number of different forms. but really it's just, effectively saying that you are experienced in the area that you want to work in, and that you've got the scope, for going somewhere with it, and now's the right time for that step change.
So, panel, how did you approach, who did you approach in general terms for your supporting statement? How did you make that decision about who to approach? Anybody?
Well, who did I approach? I approached because up until although when I applied for the funding, the piece of work that I was the piece of music that I was working on hadn't actually been released, but I had plays on Radio 6 and Lake Junction, so I approached the presenters for that, Max Reinhardt, who did a supporting statement. I just tried to really, I thought I'll try and kind of go at the top, and if people say no, I'll just kind of keep filtering my way through. But yes, so it was just people that I'd worked with before, but would I felt specifically kind of connect to, because I felt in my form, although I was kind of like heavy on one side with the experience that I had, I did miss the singer-songwriter music side of it. So I tried to balance. I was always trying to kind of balance the application form out, and the supporting statements really helped, I think. And they agreed, and they did it. Yeah.
For mine, I couldn't remember who it was. I've just looked at my form as Keeley was chatting, because I was like, who was it? I can't remember. I didn't have a supporting statement. That's why I couldn't remember. On the application, it says that you can include like a review of like a third-party review of your work. So I've just checked. What I did was I attached a press report for Long Division Festival that had just passed, and it had some, like, partly due to our very good press company, had some really, really good reviews of the event that really kind of signified that it kind of gone up a level. So there was probably lots of people I could have asked to personally put themselves forward, but I can't remember why. I just felt that was like the document was just really good. It just felt it was like a really powerful kind of example of what my practice was. So I thought I'd just mention that, because that might, someone watching that might be more suitable for their work if they've got something that's just really strong, that really kind of captures what they've done from I think press, obviously, like, they're going to be fairly honest about stuff like that. So yeah, then maybe that's another option for some people. I don't know if that's common or not, though.
I think that just reflects what Simon said earlier about external reviewers, actually. So that's a really good example. Thanks, Dean. So I've got one final question, which is probably for Simon, which is, can you incorporate equipment costs in the budget?
Yes, you can. Buying new equipment might be really relevant to what it is you want to do, and you're making a new step in what you do, or trying to develop a new skill, then having that equipment might be essential to the project as a whole. So it's fine to. Just a couple of points. Firstly, make sure that you make it really clear in your application, in the narrative, what you need that equipment for. A big fault sometimes with some applications is just plonking some equipment in the budget and not really talking about it anywhere else. So it just seems a bit weird and unexplained. And then also just make sure to show that you've had a couple of quotes or found different quotes online for the price of that equipment, because this is public funding, so we need to make sure that you're showing that you gain the best value quote possible for it. Yeah, you can definitely include equipment.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to round up now by asking each of you in turn to give a short killer piece of advice to anyone who's thinking of applying. Starting with you, Supriya, what's your one takeaway piece of advice?
I would say develop a really clear idea of where you want to go, and make the application really simple and direct.
Brilliant, thank you. James?
I'm glad you didn't say this one because I couldn't think of anything else. Get advice from anybody and everybody. Speak to the Arts Council, people you know, anybody to help you kind of put the application together.
They're both good pieces of advice. I guess I would say, well, just do it. Like, don't feel that it's not for you in any way. Don't feel that you don't deserve to go for it, like you do, and treat it as a positive experience, a learning experience. Even if you don't get it, it's good that you've done it. It's a good thing to do, so it's worth doing.
Brilliant, thank you. Keeley, sorry, you're last.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of nodding and agreeing with all of that. Yeah, I think that, for me, finding someone alongside who could help me put the thing, could have that different perspective viewpoint on it, which kind of then that to make that commitment with someone right at the beginning, because I think if I'd have done it on my own, I might have talked myself out of doing the application form halfway through. So the commitment is kind of there at the beginning. So the relationships and the anchors are being formed even in the application form. And I always work, if I can't do anything, which I can't do most things, I work with people. There are always people. The more you need to try and build a team, people that are going to help. And if I can get it, then yes, I have confidence in every single person.
Any final words, Simon?
Just be ambitious and be bold. We want to see ambition in the work that you do. Doing so will give you a better chance of being successful.
That's all brilliant. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar tonight. It's been so informative and interesting to hear all your personal journeys and all the advice from Simon. I hope everybody viewing has found it really useful and informative. And yeah, thanks for staying with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.